Long before he was tasked with leading the Roman Empire, Marcus Salvius Otho was a notorious aristocratic delinquent. He was famous for roaming the dark streets of Rome at night with a gang of friends, searching for unsuspecting, vulnerable citizens just to grab them and toss them high into the air for sport. While this surviving bust shows the stern, weathered features of his ancient Etruscan lineage, Otho's early public life stood in sharp contrast to the dignity expected of his bloodline. He climbed the social ladder through calculated sycophancy. After his father's death, Otho feigned a deep romantic passion for an elderly, decrepit freedwoman at court, using her influence as a bridge to reach Emperor Nero's inner circle. These early years defined him as an opportunistic parasite, a man who had mastered the art of thriving within the moral rot of Nero's court. That opportunistic streak reached its peak when Nero needed a cover for his beautiful mistress, Poppaea Sabina. Otho agreed to a sham marriage, acting as a placeholder so the emperor could keep her close without a public scandal. But the arrangement fell apart when Otho actually fell in love with his own wife. The tension led to a nearly unthinkable standoff. Otho physically locked the emperor out of the bedroom, ignoring Nero's enraged threats from the other side of the door. Nero was too afraid of a public scandal to execute his favorite companion. Instead, he annulled the marriage and sent Otho into a decade of exile as the governor of Lusitania, modern-day Portugal. This punitive appointment inadvertently changed him. Stripped of the capital's distractions, Otho spent 10 years learning the mechanics of provincial administration, all while quietly nursing a grudge against the man who had taken his wife. Away from Rome, Otho proved to be a surprisingly competent and moderate governor, earning the respect of his subjects over a 10-year term. But his ambition was reignited by an astrologer named Seleucus, who predicted that Otho would not only outlive Nero, but eventually rule the Roman world. When the elderly governor Galba rebelled against Nero in 68 CE, Otho was the first to join him. He funded the revolt with his own gold, believing the childless Galba would name him as the next imperial heir. Galba betrayed those expectations. In early 69, he reached past Otho and adopted a young aristocrat named Piso as his successor. This calculation left Otho in a desperate position. He had spent his fortune and borrowed heavily to fund his lifestyle and Galba's rise. His debts were now so massive that he believed only the imperial treasury could keep him from falling to his creditors. Otho realized he was out of options. To survive, he would have to seize the empire by force. The coup began with a lie. During a morning religious sacrifice, Otho whispered to the emperor that he had a fever and quietly slipped away from the palace. He fled in a closed sedan chair, but his panic grew when the pace slowed. He jumped out and began to run toward the Praetorian guard camp, stumbling so badly he ran right out of his own shoe. It was a frantic, uncoordinated start, but the bribes he had distributed among the guards were effective. The Praetorians swarmed the streets, cornered Galba and Piso, and killed them both. The murder took place in the Roman Forum, the political and religious center of the city. Otho's panicked flight through the streets had ended in a bloodbath, leaving him with a throne built on the desecration of his predecessor. Otho's reign lasted only 3 months. In the north, the legions had declared their own commander, Vitellius, as emperor, and his veteran armies were already marching toward Rome. The rival Roman armies met on the flat plains of northern Italy, near a village called Bedriacum. This map shows the scale of the collision, as tens of thousands of Roman legionaries were funneled into a single, brutal clash. The aftermath was staggering. 40,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the field, while Otho waited for news at his headquarters in the rear. When the messengers arrived with the casualty counts, Otho's ambition seemed to vanish. He was suddenly confronted with the full human cost of the civil war he had helped ignite. His generals urged him to fight on, pointing to the fresh reserve legions still at his disposal. Otho refused, declaring that it was better for one man to die than for thousands more to perish in his name. He spent his final evening methodically. He burned his private correspondence to protect his friends from the next emperor, distributed his remaining cash to his servants, and left his door open so he could say a final goodbye to anyone who entered. Before retiring, he drank a glass of cold water and tested the edges of 2 daggers. He placed the sharper one under his pillow, and then he peacefully went to sleep. At dawn, he woke and ended the war with a single precise blow to his own heart. The courtier, who had once bribed his way into favor and murdered his way to the throne, had chosen to die to save the state from further slaughter. This final act inspired a level of devotion that surprised his contemporaries. As his funeral pyre was lit, many of his own soldiers chose to kill themselves so they could die alongside him.